show begin.
Well, hello there. I am so excited to introduce you to our show tonight. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about empathy, what it is, what it isn't, why it matters, and how to practice it. And but before we talk about this, and I believe that empathy could change our world.
Mhm.
But before we get on with the show, first let's have this gentleman
Mhm.
over here introduce himself. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm Beth Green, otherwise known as Granny Rocks.
And I am James Maynard, otherwise known as the Songbird. And I'm here to handle the chat. Please chat with us. I'll pass it on to Beth, and she will talk directly to you in person.
That's right. But you have to be here in person for me to talk to you live because otherwise I won't be on the air when you write to me, which is fine, but then I'll write back. So,
There you go.
okay, and we broadcast, did you tell them this? Our show, this is Granny Rocks, and we broadcast every Wednesday night. It's at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And it told us that
Yeah.
we're live, so that's a good sign. You
Hmm.
just have to find it.
So you know
Okay,
what? I'm going to do this.
excellent. So I'd like to start out by talking about what empathy is and what it isn't. So, oh, we already have.
Yes, Tracy says hello. Hello back at you, Tracy.
Hello, Tracy. So I'm sure that you are just like hanging on for dear life, waiting to hear these words of wisdom. But actually, I am serious that empathy could change our world. It has changed our
It really has
world.
changed our world.
Yes. So, first of all, there's a lot of words that people can confuse. There's empathy, there's sympathy, there's compassion.
Hmm.
I'm not going to mention judgment and all of those things. So, which we also have quite a bit of, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so empathy is the ability to get inside another person. Now, what I say is different from sympathy and compassion. And there's a very specific other thing that empathy is not, which I'm going to explain to you in a minute. It's just not merging. So when you are sympathetic, somebody comes to you and says,
So sad.
something terrible happened to me. Well, it probably did. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't. There's a lot of terrible things that happen all the time. And so I feel for you. I feel for you. Oh, that is so terrible, honey. I'm choking on the show. You can have sympathy for me, right? So that is not empathy. That is, I am me and I hear about your pain and I essentially feel sorrow for you.
But it's definitely an I thou relationship.
It is. It still is a separation. Well, we always have some separation about this. If I feel compassion for you, usually we're talking about having understanding. Oh, I'm compassionate for you. I understand what you're going through. It's similar to sympathy, but not exactly the same as I am feeling compassion for your situation. I'm not blaming you. I'm realizing the difficult times that you're having. Versus sympathy, which says, yeah, he was an awful guy, and there it is. So now, what's the difference between that and empathy? Well, empathy, you are inside that other person, and you can actually feel their feelings. Now, many times we automatically feel empathy
Oh, look, we have
because
another
we have
comment.
gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
There, look at that.
Todd says, "Hi there, you two. Great topic. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you,
Back at
Todd.
you."
Thank you. So,
Elizabeth says, "Hello there, and sends a heart of love."
oh, wonderful. Hello there, Elizabeth.
Back at you.
So, for those of you who are coming on now, I'm distinguishing between empathy and sympathy and all of the things that
Compassion.
empathy is, and compassion. And
And Catalina says hello with waves of hi.
hello, waves back. So, okay, so let's say I am going through the same thing that you are. Okay, neither of us can get an abortion anymore, for instance.
Right,
I feel empathy because I'm in the same boat that you are.
right.
So that is a way of feeling empathy, and it is a common way that we do feel empathy. Or my husband left me too, or I'm appalled by the morality of people today, or whatever it is. And here we go.
Farid says, "Very nice. Thumbs up. Thank you, Farid."
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
So we started with sympathy and compassion, where I am still me and I am feeling for you. And here's another one.
Oh, and Amy says, "Hello, Beth and James. Thank you for making these distinctions. Love you both."
Thank you,
Love you
Amy. We love you
too.
too. So now, on the other hand, when we have empathy, we are actually feeling the same feelings you are. Now, this is interesting. You could say that I have the same feelings that you do, so I can really feel empathy. But the kind of empathy I'm talking about is you're actually feeling the other person's feelings. You may not have the same situation, but you are inside them and you're feeling their feelings. Now, there are people who are empathetic or believe that they are empathetic, but they get lost in those feelings, and then they aren't them anymore, or they are no longer objective in any way. So people, that can be a powerful emotion, but if you're merging with the other person, you can't really have any objectivity and you can't help them or yourself. And I call that merging. Now, why would we merge with someone else? Well, we may overly identify with them for some reason. That's my daughter. That could be
Right.
a reason. Or this is my friend. Or I want to please them. So I want to be like, oh, I want to seem like the most empathetic, sympathetic person in the whole planet, right? So this comes back to ego, right? So instead of really being empathetic, we're kind of like, so look at me, I'm so empathetic, I'm wonderful, I'm feeling your feelings.
Or feeling so weak that you can't help but just merge with the other person's point of view.
That's another factor. Let's
Yeah.
say our energy field is pretty weak, and we don't know where we begin and anyone else
Yeah.
it begins or ends. And if we are doing that, we can notice that. If, let's take a look at, think about these different situations where you may be feeling sympathy, like, oh, you poor thing, or compassion is like, I understand why you did that, or you're feeling their feelings because they are your feelings, or you're like overwhelmed with their feelings because you have lost your sense of self or never had it, right? Or because you want to prove something about yourself, what an incredibly compassionate and wonderful person you are. I have never done any of those, right?
Yeah.
And there is another friend.
Oh, Blanquita. Hello, Beth and James. She sends a couple of hearts of love. Hola.
Now,
Buenos noches.
buenas noches, but it's not in, yeah, it may
It
be
is.
the evening there too, because
In
she's
Ecuador.
in Ecuador. So now I'm talking about empathy means I know what you feel because I feel it, but I don't merge with you, so I don't get lost in those feelings. Now, Now you can say, who cares? What's all this nonsense about? Well, I'm going to tell you who cares. I cares. And if we actually practiced empathy, and it is a practice. Oh, and buenas noches,
And gusto estar con ustedes.
Blanquita is saying that she is happy to be with us, and
yes.
Sophie is saying, hello, lovely Beth and James.
Nice night.
Nice night. Thank you, Sophie.
Hello, Sophie.
Wonderful friends. These are really devoted
Thank you for the love
listeners.
And blessings.
So why is empathy, could it save our world? Well, because when you're empathetic with someone, you're inside them and you stop judging because you can see what they are actually feeling. You can see it. And you can see it because you can feel it or you can observe it. Let's say I'm with someone and I find myself crying, and I'm crying because they are really deeply sad, but I'm still me because I pull out of it in a minute and I'm not crying anymore. When I'm crying for myself, believe me, it's not like that. I cry. And I cry. And I cry, and I cry, and I cry, and I cry. The world today is so awful. I'm going to cry. It's awful, awful. Well, that is a very paralyzing place to be, actually, to tell you the truth. It's not an empowered place, and we have no objectivity because we're not really. See, we can get lost in sympathizing with someone. Oh, you're such a, oh, yes, your husband was so terrible to you, but, you know, you didn't. Nobody knows that you have been secretly putting arsenic in his food for 15 years. You know what I mean? So we can get all wrapped up in feeling so sympathetic, and we're not using our critical judgment. We're not actually looking at the other person that we're sympathizing with. It becomes like a mutual admiration society. Oh, yes, he's so terrible. Yes, he is terrible.
Commiserate together.
Commiserate. Yes, don't they say that misery loves company?
Right.
So commiserate loves company too.
Yeah, co-misery.
That's right. But now, let's say you are being empathetic. You're not doing any of that. You're not holding someone's hand and say, oh, you poor dear, although you might. But what you're doing is you're seeing into them. You are actually seeing into them, their hearts, what is going on for them. So now, guess what? Instead of just being sympathetic or being overwhelmed by their feelings or looking like a terrific person, you're actually, or getting angry. Oh yeah, I can see your behavior and it makes me pissed off. But you actually look into them and you see what's going on for them, and suddenly you're in a whole different universe because you are objective. And you can, when you practice empathy, and it is a practice, a spiritual practice, a human practice, a necessary psychological practice in this world, when you are practicing empathy, you can realize when you can actually help people because you'll have something to tell them that they don't already know. Now, what do I mean by that? See, if somebody comes to you and says, oh, the world is so terrible, my husband is so terrible, I'm so terrible, I'm sick, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just saying, you're saying, oh, yes, it is terrible, this is really terrible. You don't have real, and then you might make a suggestion like, well, maybe you should kill him, or, have you gone to the doctor, or whatever it is. That isn't really dealing with what's going on. But when you empathize with someone, you know what they're actually feeling and where it's coming from.
Yeah. And
when you do, guess what? You actually have something to offer because you can see what's going on for them. Where all that upset is coming from. Lots of time people say, oh, I'm upset about this, and you say, oh, yeah, that's really terrible. But they're really not upset about this. They're upset about that. But they don't know what the that is because they're so overwhelmed by this, and they've told so many people that they're upset about this, that they're not looking for any other options about what might really be bothering them. But when you're empathetic, and I'm going to give you some examples of this, when you're not merging, and you're not like glomming onto their feelings and crying too, you actually can see, oh my god, this is bringing up a pain from when you were 5 years old, and the genesis of that pain is X, and this is what you can do about it because I can see what's happening to you.
We had an example of that in my case just the other day, where you, in your empathy, you sensed that I was feeling lonely.
Right, and it didn't look like that.
Right.
I mean, it looked like a whole different thing was going on with him, but I went into his heart and I saw this lonely young man. Of course, James is still a young man, but he was a little younger there, like 50 years or something.
Yeah,
Anyway,
right.
Carry on. Go on,
Yeah.
James. This is very helpful.
Well, let's see now.
So I
The
went
lonely young
inside and I
man was when
saw.
I had let me think. Why don't you remind me?
Well, I went in there and I saw that beneath a certain behavior, which did not look like loneliness.
Yeah, I looked like I had it together,
Right.
or at least I thought I did, right?
He thought he looked like he had to do that. But what he was just detached. He was detached. And
Oh, I remember now.
right, and I was like mad because he was detached and I was unhappy.
You took it personally.
I took it personally. Of course I took it personally. But then I went through and I started looking in there and I saw this lonely young man.
Mm-hmm. And it turns out that it was a summer where I was living in a different city just for the summer, and I was all alone. And I felt really, really lonely. And I ultimately made friends with some people and so on, but I still felt lonely because I was away from my usual people in my life.
You were feeling lonely because you were still separating from the people who you were friends with.
Yes, that's right. Even then, I was separating from them. Yes, that's right.
How soon we
forget.
Right. So I could see this, that he was not taking advantage of the opportunity to really connect to people. And it has turned out to be a very interesting exploration because by staying detached from people, even though he was lonely inside, he actually lost a real connection to people and was having trouble finding his way to people. It even impacted his ability to follow people's conversations because he was too busy staying apart. He didn't connect to them. He didn't try to understand them. He was just, and it was connected to a lot of things. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but just taking him back to that memory in Philadelphia and all of the things that he went through that summer and how you could actually see how he was sabotaging the possibility of any connection. And saying, okay, James, is that what you want to do?
And the answer is no. I'd rather feel connected with people.
Right. See, he thought that he was powerful when he was separate, free to do anything he wanted. I don't need to be with those people. I'm free to do anything I want. Right, whatever that would be that I really want to do. So it gave him a false sense of power, but it really made him lonely. And he never put that together before. So this is just one example of something that we've been doing because we ran a group. We had a group this past weekend. I do intuition training. If anybody is interested, you can contact me. I think my email address is there. So I train people to use their intuition and how to use it accurately. And intuition is very, very powerful. It can help you to see into someone. So I was training people in empathy. And it's like, we can actually do that. You could see yourself going through a tunnel and going from the tunnel into the heart of the other person. And what do you see? And you don't control it and you don't plan it. And then you see what you see. And in this particular case, I saw a young man who was cross-legged, but he couldn't really put his legs down like in a yoga position. And he was, lanky and young. And I said, and he felt lonely. I could see he felt lonely. And I asked James about that. I told him about the image I saw. Well, because I saw that image, that opened up this entire thing. And then I could help him. And he could help himself.
Yeah. And in the intuition training, I did that practice that you were guiding us in, the tunnel from my heart to the heart of the person I was working with. And I was able to sense and feel successfully several different things that she was experiencing.
Exactly. And James has been doing this with me too. He has been practicing empathy with me for the first time in our entire relationship of 11 and a half years.
That's right.
He has felt sympathy for me.
Yes.
He has felt compassion for me. He has felt competition with me. He has felt a lot of things. But he has never been inside me before to know how I feel. And it has completely, and this is like, ta-da! This is the news. News flash. He's changed because he's had the experience of being inside me and knowing what I'm going through for the first time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And he, all of a sudden, he was able to stop being competitive and start being supportive because he could see what I was going through. Absolutely amazing. And so, you see, I'm so enthusiastic about this. I wanted to tell all my audience that we have had a real success with this. Now, it is true that I'm very intuitive, and James is intuitive, and he's been practicing. But this is a huge change and a big breakthrough. Now, you could say, well, what about me? How can I do this? Well, first of all, you have to want to. And why I said that is first, you may not want to have empathy for someone. You may hate them so much. Like you may hate Joe Biden or Donald Trump or just anybody, your boss, your ex-husband or wife. And do you want to have empathy? No, you don't. You want to stay judgmental. You want to be angry. You want to skewer them. You
want to win the arguments and be adversarial.
Exactly. Very important point. See, we used to have a lot of arguments. And we have hardly any arguments since we've been doing this for a few days now. Okay, it's only been a few days, but it's still a miracle. Okay. And because, yes, it would be like my point of view versus his point of view versus my point of view and versus his point of view and everybody's point of view. Well, when you have empathy, you're not even arguing. You're not discussing on that level. You're looking inside someone. You're seeing them. You're trying to understand what's happening to them. Then you bring it to them, and they try to understand what's happening to them. And automatically, you start to figure out what to do in different situations because you have a caring for one another and you have an appreciation for what the other person is really going through. If we only had this discussion about abortion, and we as an organization, I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization called The Stream. And we tried to have, in fact, we had a wonderful meeting years ago about someone who is pro-life versus pro-choice. And the arguments are so stupid. Of course there's life in the womb, but on the other hand, the woman has a life too. There's just, nobody is really trying to empathize. Why do you feel this way? And we discovered that the woman who was really adamantly pro-life would have been dead if her mother had been allowed to have an abortion. So she has a real vested interest. And other people have had abortions and would be dead if they weren't legal. So, I mean, there's a lot of emotion, but nobody is really trying to understand the other person. And this understanding is so much deeper than, will I understand? So now, let's take a journey, a fun journey. Nobody's going to be grading you on this, but it is an exercise. Think of someone that you may not care for particularly. And it could be somebody you know, or it could be a figure, from the news. And think about them for a minute, who it is, and examine your feelings towards them. Anger, sympathy, compassion, disdain, judgment, whatever it is. And try on empathy. Just sit there and visualize this person go neutral. You're not there to judge. And fortunately, you don't have to fix them either, right? But just think about that person and see yourself going through a tunnel into their heart and see if anything comes to you. It may not. This is maybe your first time doing anything like that, and don't worry if you can't do it. But don't judge it and say, oh, that can't be true. So I'm thinking of someone that I absolutely hate, despise, and want to rip up. And me, I never have those kinds of feelings. No, not me. And I can see him, it happens to be a him, as a child being yelled at and shamed for failing. And that child made a decision that young that he could never be seen as failing because of the way he was treated. This is an example. Now, am I right about that person? I don't know. But it certainly changes the way I feel about him, just even practicing this. So now you try it if you haven't already. Just go in there and see what pops into your head. And this image really did pop into my head. I didn't make it up. Your boss, anyone. You may not even understand what you're seeing. For example, I'm seeing a friend who used to be a friend, who is not a friend anymore. And I just looked at her and I saw her crying as a little girl. And she is feeling very blamed for something. And she keeps saying, I can't help it. I can't help it. I can't help it. So now if I were with this person or I was called upon, I could go in with her and say, hey, honey, I'm seeing an image of you as a child and you're being blamed and you just feel like you're being blamed for something that you either didn't do or you cannot control. What is it? And that is a healing moment where I could actually do that. Or as in the case that I gave before about the man who was being treated abusively, emotionally as a child, well, I'll never see him. But at least I can change the way I feel about him. So it can lead to actual healing conversations, or it can heal you, because anytime we get over our anger, our disgust, and our judgment, we are healed on the inside and we become more well. Well, my goodness, the time has slipped away. So I'd like to invite you to think very deeply about this topic, maybe even watch this show again. and start looking at people empathetically. And do not worry if you can't do it the first 10 times or 100 times. Just keep trying. Trying to, it's like empathy is putting yourself in someone else's skin, in their shoes, and feeling. And sometimes you will feel their pain, not just observe images. You might actually be crying and feeling the pain that they're in. And that is okay. Just don't get lost in it. I gotta go. This is the Granny Rock Show. We broadcast every Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a program every Thursday night called Beth Green's Magical Piano Improvisations. And I just basically play the piano. 7 p.m. on Thursday nights.
Pacific time.
Pacific time. So, like the show, love the show, share this show. People need to hear this message.
Yeah, like you said, it could change the world.
It could change the world.
Everybody was practicing empathy.
Everyone was practicing empathy.
Or even if it's just a few of us, that you can change your world.
That is exactly right. You can change your marriage. You can change your friendships. You can change your world. You can change yourself on the inside and bring yourself more peace, because the more we can understand, the less judgmental we are, the less, we are. And we need that too. And I mean, I'm asking for empathy also. I want to be seen on the inside. I don't want people to just flatter me. Oh, Beth, you're so wonderful. That leaves me with all the crap inside that, I mean, I love it when people tell me I'm wonderful. Don't misunderstand. But I need more than that. I need people to see me and help me. And we all do. So share this show. Share the concept. Practice empathy. Do the best you can. And let's make a better world, shall we?
Yes.
Oh, this is lovely.
Well, Sophie says, thank you. Yes, we can change our world. She sends hearts, and she says, love you.
We love you
Love
too,
you too, Sophie.
Thank you, and come back next week, or come back tomorrow for some music.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye for